Great. So let me get started. I think we're still waiting on. Is Camilla's not here yet? No. So we're still waiting on one panelist. So we'll just get started, and then we'll come back to her if she still zooms in later. So I'll introduce our first speaker. Then will be. So we have a very distinguished panel of four speakers, and our first speaker now will be Lorraine Liba. She received a PhD in food science in 2001 and an MBA from the Yale School of Management in 2016. She is the founder and president of Kuwa Women's Foundation, a nonprofit focusing on the empowerment of African girls and women in STEM, business, and leadership. Our second speaker will be Juliana Horowitz. She received her PhD in political science and government from Maryland in 2006. And she is currently the Associate Director of Research at the Pew Research Center. And then we will have Amilcar Guzman, who received his PhD in Education Policy and Leadership in Higher Education in 2020. And he is the Director of Evaluation and Outcomes at the League of Women Voters. And in addition, he's an adjunct professor in the School of Education at American University, focusing on higher education policy and research, as well as community affairs and government relations. So I would like each speaker in this order to give us some introductory remarks and tell us a little bit about the work that you do, the skills that you use, especially in relation to the skills you received as a doctoral student at Maryland, how you arrived in your current position, and how mentoring and networking have been part of your career, and then provide one piece of advice for our current students, something that you wish you would have somebody would have told you when you were a student here at Maryland some time ago. So why don't we start with Lorraine? Lorraine, let's just start it.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Fantastic. All right. Well, good afternoon. And I do have to say it is such a privilege and an honor to be here and to be on this panel. As Ralph shared, I got my doctoral degree from the University of Maryland 20 years ago now, right? It's gone by really quickly. And, you know, I had such a phenomenal experience at the University of Maryland. I actually got a faculty position before I graduated. So my PhD was very, very productive, very illustrious. Got a lot of opportunities, and it's really been the foundation of my career. And so I'm just so grateful to the organizers and to Anna and everybody and Susan for having me back and to have the opportunity to kind of share my story, my insights, my experience. And I'm just really honored to be here. So Ralph shared a little bit about my background. I do want to correct, I actually got my MBA from La Salle University, and I'll talk about my decision to get an MBA after my PhD. And then I did go to the Yale School of Management to do their Women's Leadership Program. So I was one of the first cohorts to do that. And again, it just transformed my whole leadership philosophy and sort of how I look at leading and developing people and talent. So maybe I'll just give you a little bit of background on the foundation, and then I'll address some of the talking points. This wraps into the talking points that Ralph had. The name of my foundation is called Our Foundation. We now have a really large group. It's called the Kuwa Women's Foundation. And the word Kuwa comes from the Swahili word Kuwa Wezeshi, which means to enable or to empower, right? To empower. So the goal of this foundation really is to develop, our mission and our purpose is to develop and advance African girls and young women in STEM, in business, and in leadership. So probably you're wondering, well, why do you need that, right? There's a lot of focus on girls' education. UNESCO, there's huge organizations that are focused on girls' education in the developing world. But unfortunately, a lot of the focus is at elementary school or primary school level. There's not as much focus on development once you get to high school. And so as I was looking at the data from my experience, girls drop off significantly in STEM fields, right? In a lot of sciences. I'm a food scientist by training and practice. And girls, the drop-off starts in high school, and then by the time they get to college, there's far fewer girls in STEM. And then in my experience in leadership, starting from when I was at the University of Maryland, I served on a lot of panels, a lot of interview panels, a lot of hiring committees from University of Maryland. My first job was, I was a faculty member at Virginia Tech. I got to teach food science at Virginia Tech before I made the transition into the food industry, into the corporate world. And so I've literally served on hundreds of interview panels and committees. I've been very fortunate to have the opportunity to be on panels because I was at public schools or public companies. Panels had to be diverse. And so I got to serve on panels. And I will share with you, I've interviewed probably over 1,000 candidates, and less than 10 are Black people, right? I've interviewed very few Black women, very few Black men. And there's just not the opportunity, right? And it is not that people are not well-intentioned, but if you do not prepare people, then they're not ready. So the resumes that come in are not ready for screening. Even when I work with our HR teams, it's very difficult to find the right people. And so based on my professional experience, I was very fortunate. From academia, I made the transition into industry. I did get an MBA. Got into leadership roles in the industry, got into leadership development programs, got a lot of visibility and exposure, and a lot of people do not get that. So the goal of my foundation really is to start sharing this learning and creating opportunities. And so some of the programs that we do mentoring. That's our most popular program. So I have mentors, we have mentors in the program who mentor girls and women who are in university in Africa. So medical students, pharmacy students, engineering students, and there's a huge demand for mentors. We also do a lot of seminars, career development seminars and webinars, where we're able to find panels of experts and professionals to share and talk about their experiences. I share my career journey. As I shared with you, I'm a scientist, but I also, I have a very cross-functional career, right? I started out as a scientist, research development, mentoring graduate students. My first graduate student is actually a professor at Hampton University right now. And then I made the transition into industry and into more commercial roles. So I'm able to share that experience and help guide people. And then we also have an awards program where we give grants for young women in Africa for either for research or for business programs, because it's very important to sort of do impactful work, right? So that's really critical. And so that is why the foundation focuses not just on developing people in STEM, but also making sure that you're able to lead, you're able to present your research. If you want to go take an entrepreneurial path, you're able to do that. If you want to take a leadership role or create organizations, as I have done, we're able to do that. So that's kind of the framework that I come from. I have a full-time job. I'm vice president of sales for a food ingredient company. As I mentioned, I've worked in corporate America for the last, I made the transition in 2007. So for the last 14 years from academia. With regards to what my PhD taught me, as I shared at the beginning, it really was a foundational, to me, it's the foundation of my career. And I think I was fortunate and privileged to have really great mentors. I had challenges, right? I'm not sugarcoating anything, right? My PhD journey was very, very lonely and very difficult, as is the case for most people. But I had advisors and mentors and research advisors who were invested in me and invested in my success and rewarded my hard work. So I learned the discipline of intellectual inquiry, right? I learned how to ask questions. I learned how to be disciplined in looking for answers. As part of my PhD program, I had a Rockefeller Foundation scholarship, which meant I had to travel. I did part of my work at the USDA, so I had to work under someone else. I actually traveled to Africa to the International Institute of Tropical Agriculture to do part of my research. I had to learn to work in different organizations. So the biggest lesson that I share with people around my PhD was the discipline of inquiry, of asking questions, of doing the hard work, of the diligence. And when I graduated, when I walked on stage, I got my diploma, right? I had finished everything. I had done my work. I had in 4 years, I finished my dissertation because I learned what it was to really be focused and to be disciplined. And so I always, that's part of my passion for really encouraging education as a foundation. Again, as you all know, the PhD is something that I think the dropout rate, I found out as a professor, the dropout rate is maybe something like 50%. A lot of people become ABD and they drop out. So being able to stay the course to the end is something that was a great foundation for me. Built a lot of networks, got to work with a lot of very different people. And that served me a lot when I now made the transition into corporate America. Because you only get on project teams if people want to work with you, right? If people don't like to work with you, it doesn't matter the letters after your name. It doesn't matter, who you are. If people don't like to work with you, they don't trust you, they don't want to work with you. So that foundation at the University of Maryland for me was very solid, and I've been eternally grateful to my professors, I've stayed in touch with most of my classmates. And so to me, that was very, 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 very valuable, Now for the final talking point, if there's one thing, I guess they call it, what I wish I had known. The biggest lesson that I communicate with people today is the intangibles, right? When you have a PhD or you have an MBA like I do, when you walk into the room, people already know that you're intellectually competent. People know that you have the technical capability. And what they're looking for now is the intangibles. What is your emotional IQ? What is your social IQ? What is your resilience? So I think a lot of times the mistake that sometimes graduates make in interviews and when I interact with people is they lead with their academic qualifications, which is great. But people already know you're great, right? If you have a higher degree, then people know you're at a certain level of society already. So they're rarely going to test you on your technical knowledge. Now, some people may, right? If you're going to be reporting into somebody who's not as qualified as you are, they may want to test you on your technical knowledge. But a lot of times, what people are looking for are what are called the intangibles. What else do you bring to the table? Do you have a spark? Do you have passion? Do you have enthusiasm? Can you motivate others? Can you influence people? Can you lead a team? Leadership is always, always big. Every role that you interview for, whether or not, I never dreamt I would go into leadership. I wanted to go into strategy, right? So I was a scientist, I got an MBA, I was gonna be a strategist. And when I got into industry, my manager said, well, you know what, you're good with people. I want you to be a leader. So people are always looking for your leadership potential. And so whenever I talk to students, always think about, emotional intelligence, social intelligence, organizational awareness. Do you understand how frameworks work? When you're talking to somebody, what is their role in an organization? So a lot of these nebulous things that are actually not taught in any classroom. Those are some of the skills that are really very, very important and would serve you well.
Thank you very much, Lorraine. Juliana, do you want to go next?
Hi, everybody. I'm so excited to be here. And I wish I could just say yes to everything Lorraine just said, and then we could just move on, because yes, I totally agree with everything that she just mentioned. But yeah, I'm just really excited to be here. And I wish that we could be doing this in person, because I love having excuses to go back to campus. So I actually went to Maryland for undergrad too. So I spent a lot of time in GVPT, a lot of time in Tidings Hall over my life. So I really do love the University of Maryland. I had a great experience, got a great education, and I got my PhD in GVPT in 2006, so 15 years ago. And I'll tell you a little bit about my PhD journey, but just to give you a little bit about my career first, I went straight from actually just a couple weeks before my graduation, and about a couple weeks after, about a month after my dissertation defense, I started working at the Pew Research Center, and I never left. So I came in as a research associate, which is our sort of like entry-level PhD position, and moved up to become a senior researcher and eventually an associate director of research, working with the social and demographic trends research program. And that's where I've been for the last 6 years, is in that position, which is a management and leadership position, but still very close to research. And I'll come back to that in a minute. But so I started my PhD in 2001, and I had taken a year off to think about what it was that I wanted to do. And I thought I wanted to go to law school because every political science major thinks they want to go to law school. And then, and realized that my heart really was in research after having some internships and doing some traveling, and realized that I really wanted to just learn more about people and institutions, and that was really my passion. And I went into grad school with an open mind in terms of what I wanted to do. My dad's a professor, he's a computer scientist, and so I grew up around academics, and grew up with the idea that I now realize was a little misguided, but the idea that you have so much sort of freedom and flexibility when you're an academic, which is true. My dad had a lot of flexibility and he was around a lot, but he was also always working. There was always something he needed to be doing, always a paper or something he had to be working on. And but I definitely went in with an open mind, and about a year into grad school, I realized that I didn't want to be a professor. I didn't enjoy teaching. At that time, I think things have changed a little bit, but with social media, but at that time there weren't a lot of opportunities for academics to really get their work out into the world and to the national debate, and to really be relevant in that way. And again, I do think that's changed a lot with social media, but at the time I didn't want to just be writing journal articles for other academics. Like, I really wanted my work to have more of a real world impact, and to be more public facing. And so once I realized that, I sort of changed my approach to how I did grad school. The social sciences in particular are very geared towards academia, and that's what they're training you to become. And that's what all the placement strategies are about. They're really to get you into a good academic position. And all of my friends were going to conferences all the time and writing journal articles, and I knew that wasn't what was going to get me a job outside of academia. And so from fairly early on, I started doing internships. Being in Maryland, just outside of DC, gave me a lot of opportunities. I spent a semester at Brookings with a fellow. I had a fellowship, and then I spent a summer at Abt Associates doing evaluation work. I spent a few months at the Center for American Progress, and really trying to figure out all the different types of jobs are out there, some on more the advocacy side, the evaluation side, think tank world, to really try to figure out what it was that I wanted to do. And so by the time I left, if I had changed my mind, I would have been in trouble. I did not have the right CV for an academic job at all. I don't know what I would have done if I decided that ultimately was what I wanted to do. But it served me well in terms of what I did decide to do. And so there were lots of challenges along the way. I thought about quitting many times. I totally believe that about 50% of people drop out of the PhD program before they finish, because I thought about it many times. But I do think that sticking with it and that discipline to really get done, and to get it done in 5 years, and to really stay on top of things, on top of my committee, really those were skills that also really have helped me in my career. Even as a project manager, I think that was my first real project management challenge, right? Which was managing these busy professors who had so much to do, and I needed feedback from them, and I needed to meet my own self-imposed deadlines. And that was a very good experience going into a job where I had to do a lot of project management. So I had to do a lot of things on my own to find a job. Our placement director, who I love, was not somebody who had a lot of knowledge of sort of the job market outside of academia. And there's no cycle like in the academic job market where when things are due, when jobs are going to be posted and where. You just sort of have to start looking whenever you think you're getting close to being done, like a few months from being done. You just have to know what the places are that you're interested in. You just have to, there's an amount of luck that positions will be open at that time. And so, so I definitely recommend early on, just, start to, just write down names of organizations that you're interested in, start to engage with some of these organizations if they have events, or reach out to people there. But anyway, so I've been at Pew for 15 years. It's been a great experience. I have worked across a lot of different research areas at the Pew Research Center. I started out doing political polling and also doing some international surveys. My main field in grad school was American politics, and my second field was comparative politics, and so that was a great fit. And Pew was small, and so I was hired to be on both of those teams. Pew has grown a lot in the last 15 years. And as the Global Attitudes Project started to grow, I became a senior researcher, mostly focused on that, but still working with other people across the center. And then somebody retired, was the director of the Social Trends Program. The associate director got promoted. And because I had built these relationships over the years, and she knew that was an area that I was really interested in, and she asked if I would be interested in moving on to that team, which is what I've done. And I would say that, of course, my technical skills have been incredibly helpful. My quantitative research skills are what I use all the time. But I echo what Lorraine said. I mean, like, I think the ability to ask questions, I think, people ask me sometimes, like, do you need a PhD to do what you do? And most people at Pew who are in my position do have a PhD, but not all. Some people are ABD, some people have a master's. I do think that one of the biggest differences that I see between people who have a PhD and people who don't is that the PhD program really trained me to think in a very sort of analytical way, just really think about what are the research questions, what are we trying to do? Like, sure, like, you can run this analysis, but why are you doing it? What are the theoretical underpinnings? Even if we're reporting it in a sort of more accessible way, and even if for the work that we do, we're not testing hypotheses, it's a very different way to write and to communicate findings. But that critical thinking, that ability to really engage intellectually with, if you're editing somebody's report or when you're thinking about your own work, like just really being able to engage with it intellectually, I think is something that is definitely a skill that I developed and really exercised in my PhD program. I think that's really important. The other thing that I think is really important, and I've also interviewed a lot of candidates, and one of the things that we really look for is the ability to communicate difficult and complex concepts to a broad audience. Right? For us at the Pew Research Center, our main audiences are what we call the informed public, the media, policymakers, and academics. Right, and especially for the media and the public, right, and for policymakers, we have to write in a very accessible way, and that can be really hard. Like, that can be really hard at first, and you want to use those technical words, and you want to, but there's some storytelling that has to go with it. There's some, just really being able to communicate in a way that's interesting and easy to understand. And really fight that instinct to talk and to write like an academic, and that's something that took some getting used to. But for me, having those opportunities in grad school to have internships and to get some experience outside of academia was extremely important in terms of those skills. And I think. In terms of what I wish I'd known, I don't know. I mean, like, I think one thing I wish I'd known is that it's okay to not be an academic. I think that, I don't know if that's the case in all the fields, but I know in the social sciences and in political science, it's almost like you've failed somehow. Like when you tell them that you're not going to go in academia. And I remember even just telling my dad, and he's like, "What do you mean? Like, what do you mean you're not going to be a professor?" And to know that and I think sometimes people go into, and we've seen this, one of the things that I've really looked for when I interview candidates who are coming out of academia is, if you're interviewing for this position because you went through the academic cycle and didn't get a job, and now you're just doing this because you're waiting it out because you want to go back, and that we can tell, and that's not what we're looking for. Like, we're looking for people who made a conscious decision that this is the world they want to be in, and they have compelling reasons for why this is what they want to do. And I really wish that placement directors would think about that a little bit more, because there aren't enough jobs out there in academia anyway. And so I think it would serve students well if they got some guidance and encouragement that there's a lot of, rigorous research. And for me, like thinking of myself as a social scientist is really important, and that hasn't changed. And and what I do is social science, even if it's not in academia. And I think that I hope all of you who are considering non-academic positions know that that's, that you should be proud of whatever job you get, and that it's not a sign of failure if you decide that you don't want to become a professor. So that's my story.
Thank you, Juliana. Amilcar?
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and I'm so very glad to be here. And thanks to Susan and also Anna for recruiting me to join this great panel. Very exciting. So my name is Amilcar Guzman. I defended my dissertation May 5th of last year, so at the height of the beginnings of the pandemic. And so I can talk about that could be a whole different panel, that process and what that was like. But I am so next Wednesday it'll be a year that I finished, and so my journey to the PhD was an interesting one. So I've been in the Washington D.C. area since 2008. And so I worked a bit on Capitol Hill, particularly on K-12 and higher ed policy. And then I actually started my master's program at Maryland. So I am a two-time TERP. And it was through my master's program that I learned a number of different things, right, that really propelled me to pursue my PhD, namely that I could, right, and that it was possible for someone like me with my background, right, and my experiences to do just that. So in between my master's and my PhD, I worked at a number of think tanks in the Washington D.C. area, namely the Council for Great City Schools, the Data Quality Campaign, really focused at this at the nexus of research and policy. And it was through those experiences that I learned that there was so much more that I wanted to study, and so much more that I wanted to know. So that's what really kind of drew me back to begin my doctoral journey. At the same time, I had a choice of going full time or going as a part-time student. So I chose kind of the part-time route because financially, it was very difficult to kind of justify going back as being a full-time student for me personally. But through that process, I was able to secure my first position in research, right? And so I worked for Casa de Maryland. It's a large immigrant rights org here in the Washington D.C. area, and I was their first director of research. And in that full-time job, I got great experiences that really helped supplement my doctoral journey. I got to work on large grants, right? I got to be able to network with different researchers across the country. And it really validated really why I decided to pursue a PhD. So I knew from the beginning that I was not going to be a full-time professor. That was not really my calling. I enjoyed teaching, I enjoyed research, but I think as folks have mentioned, the pressure to publish, right, was not something that I was particularly interested in. Publishing in journals versus being able to publish in spaces that I really wanted, that I really felt could be more impactful. So for me, I knew from the very beginning that my journey would be that I wouldn't be seeking a faculty route. So all of the classes, all of the research that I did really helped me move in that direction. So currently, I am the director of evaluation and outcomes at the League of Women Voters, and how I got this position, I actually got the position before I finished up my doctorate. My supervisor in my old job at CASA actually became the CEO at the league, and she recruited me to join. So that's kind of one of the first, I think, nuggets is the networking component, right? And making sure that you're developing strong relationships, not only in not only in the academic space, but in your internships, right? And in different professional experiences that you might be having, because those might lead to full-time positions once you finish. And so my role, my day-to-day is I kind of lead the research shop, and the league is really focused on increasing civic participation across the country. And so we have about 750 leagues comprised of members from all different states, from all different ages. And so I'm the first person to kind of have this role in which we're really trying to measure what is the effectiveness of the work that's happening in leagues across the country. So the work is interesting, right? And sorry about that. Did I mute myself? Perhaps. Okay. So I'll back up a couple of seconds. So the day-to-day is very interesting in my current role, and it's everything from writing focus group protocols to running focus group to launching surveys to writing grants to thinking through how is the best way to measure our effectiveness in all of these different areas. So it's a fantastic role, and it's a great time to be at the league right now. And lots of the skills that I use on my day-to-day, I really hone through my doctoral journey. So my dissertation, right, examined how Latino college graduates are engaging civically. And so I did a number of focus groups, and then launched a national survey, right? So I was able to really help to start to develop some of those skills throughout my dissertation experience. In addition to that, I did some grant writing as well as a doctoral student. I was able to work with my advisor on several grants. And so that's really helped me in my role now, being able to kind of think through a project from beginning to end, and in particular pieces around the budget, right? So that would be something else to think about, right? So how are projects budgeted, right? That's something I think that I got a taste of, but I wish that I would have known more and would have gotten more experience with throughout my doctoral journey. So in addition to my current role, I'm also an adjunct professor. And so also as a doctoral student, I had the opportunity to be a TA and learn about how fun is it to teach, and how the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so with that, I knew that I was interested in teaching, but really only one class a semester. I feel like that's all that I could handle, and it would keep me engaged still, right? And not overburdened. So thankfully, I was able to land a position last summer, and it's been a great experience thus far. And I think really allows me to tap into that particular passion, right? Without being overburdened. And then one more position that I'm currently doing is, after I completed my degree, because of my doctoral work, I was recruited to launch a research project through NSF. And because my advisor and I had such a great relationship, we launched a consulting firm that we work on each week, right? So we're working on kind of this large scale research project that we will publish on and be able to present at different conferences with. So when we put that together, I feel like there's lots of facets of my doctoral journey, right? That I wouldn't be here today without the experiences that I went through. So a couple things I think to think about that is that the path is not linear, at all whatsoever. And so I knew that I wasn't going to be a professor, but life happens throughout this journey, right? And so I had a number of things happen, from a parent passing away to getting married, right? And so one piece of advice to think about is if you came into your journey kind of with a singular goal in mind, and now you're at a place where you're rethinking through what that might be, that's totally okay, right? Because we know that the path is not direct, right? And that things happen that might spark your interest or your passions differently. The second thing, and I kind of hinted at this, but being able to get involved and really being able to take advantage of all the opportunities at Maryland, right? That you might have. Like, I wouldn't have my faculty position now if I hadn't been a TA, right? Because I wouldn't have any teaching experience at all. My advisor and I wouldn't have been able to launch our consulting firm if we hadn't worked on projects before, right? So being able to kind of look at opportunities strategically, right, that might help you once you're finished, even if it's not that faculty route, because you can still teach or do different pieces of your doctoral journey afterwards, based off some of the experiences that you're having. Third, something that really got me through was my support system, right? So in my program, we had a great support system of folks who were, some of which were also going part-time. So we got to share in that journey together and really help each other get through, right? From thinking through what politics were to having different folks read drafts, right? So that's, I think, something else to really think about as you all are also navigating that journey. And this was mentioned before, but interpersonal skills, I agree with 100,000%, because in my current role, right, folks know that when it comes to different technical aspects of this research or this project that I am the particular lead, but there's so many aspects that you have to deal with in the workplace. An example is working with people that you don't really like, right? Or, I mean, that happens everywhere. So how are you going to manage that? Like, yes, you have a PhD, but that's not going to help you with that, right? You need to be able to navigate issues, navigate problems, navigate conflict in a way, I think, that that will put you in a better place, right? That will also make you stand out there. Next is internal politics, and this was also hinted at with your committee in particular, right? It's how do you navigate moving through in a way that's going to be successful, right? That, I think, is a great test. And I think something that just replays itself in the workplace, right? Whether you go into whether you go the faculty route or not, right? Being able to really understand how things, what's being said and what's not being said, being able to kind of navigate different structures to help you be successful. That, I think, is a skill that will be so useful, whatever position that you go once you're done. And then I think, and this was also hinted at as well, and kind of the last piece is kind of the persistence, right? And being able to kind of stick with something across time, right? You learn a lot about yourself, and you learn a lot about getting through very, very difficult times, and in some cases getting feedback that's very strong from your chair, right? All of that strengthens you, I think, as a professional. And really, when I think about my experience just last year, when I got through that, I feel like I can do anything, right? And that's been my mantra since then, right? If I got through that hellish experience, I feel like I can do anything, right? And that, I think, really can help open up doors for all of you, right? As you continue on and think about your particular next steps. Thank you.
Thank you, Amilcar. So I'd like to open it up for discussion, but I just want to make sure, double check that if Camila has arrived. I don't see her on the participants. Okay, so let's just open it up for the 4 questions. So you can just unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all so much. That was really great to hear from all of you. I have a kind of logistical question for Amilcar, which is that you just mentioned you have a job and 2 projects, or like basically 3 jobs. And I'm just wondering, like, it sounds really appealing to be able to explore like all these different facets of like, we have all these different skills and interests. And I'm wondering just what your experience is with balancing those 3. Do you feel like you have work-life balance, which of course we all are after? And yeah, just how is that balance going for you?
So, my doctoral journey was great because I think you also learn about the balancing act, right? From writing to class, and if you're TAing, and then your personal life. So it's been really that, I think, aspect I've been able to really hone during my time. And initially I hadn't thought that I would, be doing 3 different things at once. So my wife was not happy when things, because for her, she was like, all right, well, you finished this, so it's like back to one job or something. And but the work that's happening is so interesting, right? So it's kind of the passion. And I talked about teaching and then being able to work on this project. So I think my doctoral journey has really allowed me to hone kind of that balancing act. And I feel like, in this situation, I have more control, right? Because, it's not like I have to teach to finish my degree, right? Or I have to publish, because my job doesn't depend on it, right? So, which is kind of the benefit, I think, for me, for not going kind of the full-time faculty route, because you would have to do that, right? So right now it's a choice versus, a requirement, right? And so that's kind of, I think also kind of comforting that at any point, like I can take a semester off from teaching, or, I could jump off the project, right? So that, I think, is helpful and comforting.
Thank you. That I appreciate the perspective of, yeah, I feel like the finishing the dissertation is this real exercise in time management and project management, and then being able to feel like, oh, I get to apply that to my life to like make impact and enjoy like these different aspects of all the things I enjoy. So thank you.
Other questions? Maria?
Hi, can I ask a question? Yeah, my question is about job security. Like, I'm a postdoc right now, and it seems like it's kind of straightforward to get the assistant professor after 2 or 3 years after being a postdoc. And my husband is a professor too, and he keeps telling me, like, if you leave, which I really want to, I don't feel like I want to be a professor, but he said that the job security, especially nonprofits, just you constantly fighting for funding, which I guess is the same at university, but it's worse. And like, you never know if maybe in 1 year that nonprofit might not even exist. And it's kind of scary. So I want to know what's your thought about job security.
I think that was that Maria who asked the question. Yeah, so maybe I'll take a stab at this because I didn't see anyone else jumping in. I'm going to give an answer that may sound a little bit more philosophical. In every sphere, job security is an issue, right? My career has been, the first 4 years of my career were in academia. And then I transitioned to the corporate world where literally people walk in one day and your whole department is gone, right? So in academia, there is pressure, right? There's pressure to publish. I was fortunate. I was in a field that I think, I published like 2-3 papers a year because I was in a field that was in a very high demand. And then, you go to the corporate world in nonprofits and whatever. So, and I think maybe Juliana alluded to this a little bit about, when you have a PhD and you're thinking about academia, I think you sort of, there's a difference between a job and your career and your life story, right? And there's a term which is called the North Star, which is what is sort of like that central point that kind of holds you down. And I think, when you listen to Amilcar's story, he's able to do three things because he's very clear what his North Star is, right? There's a central point that holds him down. And once you know what that is, you can do anything else, right? And jobs come and go, but your career remains, right? So I am a food scientist. I tell people I have an MBA, I've done management, I've been in leadership roles, I'm a VP of sales, but I was a VP of innovation. I was a director of innovation. I was a food science professor because I'm a food scientist at the core. And so once you're that, you can do many different things. So Maria, I want to tell you not to fixate on an organization or a role or a position. Yeah, we have to be practical. You want to know all of those things. But when you walk up to introduce yourself to somebody, and I think Juliana talked about storytelling, you're much more than your job, right? You're much more than your postdoc. I think that's the paradox of the PhD, right? When you have a PhD, it defines so much about your life because you dedicate so much. It's something you want a lot. You make a lot of sacrifices for. My dad was also a college professor. That's why I went into academia to start with. I thought that's what I wanted to do, right? Because I had always been around academia. My mom was a teacher. I thought that was what it was. So when you get a PhD, it defines so much about you, but you also have to understand that that is not who you are, right? It's something that helps you define who you are. So what I would say is, now that you're in your postdoc, if you're looking at nonprofits, look at every single element of what you bring to the table, because there's always going to be an opportunity somewhere that suits some particular skill set, and maybe it's never linear, right? I never, in the corporate world, when I manage people would always come in and tell me that, oh, it's been 2 years, I need a promotion and I need a new title. And I never looked for that. I always look for experiences. I always thought about movement as, am I working with a different group of people, right? I started from, very technical roles, went into very commercial roles, went into product development. So I would encourage you, as you're in your postdoc right now, and I think everybody has said this, when you're at a conference, talk to different people. Look at what is out there. Do a self-assessment, right? There's all of these assessments that say what are all of the things you bring to the table besides just your qualification? What are your personality attributes? A lot of the jobs that are going to be around tomorrow don't exist today, and a lot of the jobs that exist today are going to be gone tomorrow, right? So always think about the difference between your career and your job. Jobs are going to come and go. Positions are going to come and go. But what is your North Star? Who are you? What's your career? What is your story? What is your mission? What is your purpose? And you can do that in many different areas, even within the nonprofit world. There are a lot of different things. You could create a nonprofit, you could lead, you could manage programs. There's a lot of different things that you can do. The other thing I want to say is that it's good to listen to people, but be very careful what you internalize. Right? Be very careful. If don't hang around people who are going to discourage you. I think Amilcar talked about the fact that you're going to be run into all kinds of people in your life. You always want to make sure that you're around positive people. You're around people who are very forward-looking. You're around people who are going to take chances on you. You're around people who empower you and who trust you. And I would just do that. Do a self-assessment. Define yourself. Know that your PhD has been a huge investment, right? It's an investment of your time, your money, a lot of sacrifices, and it puts you at a certain level in society. So you should not be running around worried about, I know job security is an issue, but you bring a lot to the table, and you should always think about it from a position of strength.
If I could just jump in really quickly to say that, I've been in a very privileged position at the Pew Research Center because we get most of our funding from the Pew Charitable Trust. So we have a very steady stream of funding. So we're not constantly fundraising and grant writing, which I realize is not typical for most nonprofits. But I will say that there are a lot of nonprofits out there that are very financially stable too, right? And so, whether it's think tanks or there are lots of other places like that. And so I just want to, I don't want you to think about like a nonprofit job as necessarily, a job at a place that might be small and vulnerable, and that if, a crisis hits like a pandemic, that all of a sudden your funding dries up, because I mean, I get it. I mean, like, I'm not a risk taker. Like, if, you know, like so for me, the notion that, you know, for me, it is important to be in a place where I know I'm not, you know, constantly at a risk of potentially losing my job, losing my funding. And there are other places out there too, like, you know, like the government, and there are lots of places where you can do research that's not in academia, and, you know, not in the corporate world, if that's not where you want to go, that might not be a nonprofit, but where you could get all the job security. So I would just, you know, just there are ways to not be an academic and still have security in your life.
Thank you. Other questions?
Hi, everyone. I am Hoshu. I'm actually currently a PhD candidate in sociology right now. I really appreciate what you mentioned before about the communication skills. I think my question is, well, I am an international student. English is not my first language. So ever since I first to writing English, it's all academic English. So I wonder, do you have any advice that before transition into a non-profit position, are there any advice to practice your communication skills? So I think I was reading lots of reports from different institutions or organizations. There are some similarities, but there are some, you know, differences. And but the differences also vary by across different organizations. And I think it's very hard for me to pick a perfect example and trying to write down as the templates. So this is my first question. Sorry, I have many questions. The second one is for the leadership and the mentorship role once you come to the non-academia. I was intern as research intern in the organization last summer. I think when I was first went to the interview and realized, holy cow, there is 99% people that are white. And it was not like my department where lots of minority and diversity there. And I think sometimes that play a role affecting my performance in my internship. I just always feel like I was lonely. I don't feel comfortable reaching out to other people asking questions. So I just wonder that as a minority and also as an international student, is there any way you can give advice for navigating the organization and find a mentor that who really wants to help you out and be one of your provide advice in your career? Thank you.
Okay, Amilcar, were you gonna say something?
Yes. So I was gonna start with the second question. So, you know, I can definitely relate. So I mentioned the league, right? And it's, you know, so the majority of our membership is predominantly white, right? So in our staff too, right? So, you know, and in prior positions that I've been in, it's been similar, right? So I can kind of relate to being in those spaces, right? You know, for me, things that I found successful are, you know, I found like-minded colleagues outside of outside of the place that I'm in, right? So through different networking experiences, right, I've been able to connect with colleagues who work in the similar kind of work, but may not be right at my particular job, and that's been helpful to help navigate and think about really the structures that exist in my current position. Also, I've been fortunate to have, you know, direct supervisors who've been very supportive, right, and have provided kind of the mentorship on how to navigate how the organization can help, or how I can kind of help move through the different parts of it. So those two things I think have been helpful for me personally. And then I also talked about my cohort, right, when I was in my program, was also kind of helpful, right, to kind of likewise be able to bounce ideas off, and I'm still in touch with them to this day, and we talk about how what's going on with them and their particular jobs. So those kind of different support systems have been so critical, right, to me kind of thinking through and kind of being able to kind of navigate the different parts of the work.
So I'll just add to everything Amilcar said, which is really true. And I'll start with your first question around communication, right? So I have an accent, as you can tell. Wasn't born in America, I'm an American now, but I grew up in Africa. And communication is a lot more than speaking, right? So what is very important is your written communication, right? People are going to read what you write a lot more than just what you say. And you can leverage, I found out that sometimes my accent is actually an icebreaker, right? People find a reason to ask me about my accent. So, you don't have to be self-conscious, right? And I've managed scientists, very smart scientists from Asia. And everybody goes, oh, I can't understand what they say, right? But they're solving like a big scientific problem and they're getting patents right? So I think, unfortunately, sometimes we miss out on people's potential because we're fixated on how they speak. So again, I want you, what I said earlier, when you're speaking from, think about, I think it was Kissinger, right? We've had people in very prominent leadership roles. I have no idea what he says when he speaks, right? I usually have to listen twice. So, think about it again, communication is expression. What's your body language? Who are you speaking with? I always try to do one-on-ones with people, or, I have aides. So if I notice that I'm presenting at a meeting and someone doesn't understand me, I make sure I go up. If it's a senior person or a leadership person, I always make sure during the break, I go up and I talk to them one-on-one and just make sure. I said, when I was explaining this, I noticed that you looked a little bit like you didn't get it, So you have to make the extra effort if you don't speak with an American accent. It's just the reality. So I would encourage you, again, when you think about communication, think of it from a positive position. What are the things you do well? Learn as much as you can, observe people. But most importantly, what people remember is that the emails that you send, the reports that you write, if you do a PowerPoint presentation. When I was at the University of Maryland, my professor, every time I was presenting, she would go through my presentation line by line, make sure that the grammar is correct, right? Because people are not going to forgive you if you have a grammatical error. They're going to assume you don't know, right? So you really want to focus on those things. I see so many immigrants who limit themselves because they're fixated on oral communication, and it is what it is, right? So I would encourage you to think about communication as being broader than just how you speak. You can tell your story in so many different ways. Figure out the most effective way to do it. And again, like I said, when you're trying to influence people, you don't have to do it all the time, but if you're presenting for a grant or if you're presenting for a project, make sure that you engage people, right? And if you notice that you're losing somebody, find a way to go talk to them one-on-one and get them on your side. So communication, storytelling, consistency, all of that is really, really critical in every field, right? But most especially when you're in nonprofits, because you're trying to influence people and move the needle. For the second question you had around mentorship, when I was at the University of Maryland in the food science program, I was the only Black PhD student, right? So everybody knew me. That's why I was on every committee, right? When I went to Virginia Tech, out of 3,000 faculty, there were 10 Black faculty. I was on every committee. In the corporate world, I was the only Black director on our campus, a campus of 300 for 6 years. I was the only Black director. And every year I would say, I need one more Black person to be a director. And they would go, there is nobody, right? Because I was on every committee. I was executive sponsor of everything. So that's just the reality of the world. If you're a minority, you're a minority. And again, I always emphasize it's not by design, it's just the way things are, so we try to fix them, but you could also figure out a way to say, okay, how do I make the most of this and how do I operate? So when you're in situations like that, you obviously do need connections, you need mentors, but I think sometimes people mix up a mentor versus a coach versus a sponsor. Right. So in an organization, a lot of times people are looking for sponsors. You're looking for that person who, if they're in a meeting and your name comes up, they only have good things to say about you, right? You don't want to be in a position where somebody's in a meeting and they call your name and they go, oh, this horrible person, you don't want to work with her. So that's a sponsor, right? And that can be anybody, right? Any organization you're in, you want to make sure people in leadership roles are your sponsors. They talk good about you. A mentor it's really somebody that you can trust, right? That you build relationships with, you can sit down and have a conversation with. So not everybody can be your mentor. You have to be very selective, and you have to ensure that you're finding people. So it may not be someone within your organization. I think your challenge was, I was in an organization, I didn't find anyone that I really felt could be a mentor. So you have to go outside and find, is there somebody who understands what you're going through and someone that you could relate to? So hopefully that helps, right? I think within organizations, you want sponsors. It could be anybody, that's fine. But in terms of mentorship, you really need someone that you can, who can help you with your growth and your development, right? And it can be someone that you respect and admire, but someone that you can really build a relationship with. And so don't limit yourself to just the space that is around you, right? Go to professional organizations, sort of interact with different people and look for spaces. And if you find somebody that you admire or you respect, or you think, you kind of like their career trajectory, or you kind of like their accomplishments, then you may approach them to be a mentor. But when you feel isolated, there's actually a phenomenon called minority leadership loneliness. I don't know how many people are familiar with that, but a lot of minorities in leadership roles are under a lot of stress, right? And it's called leadership loneliness, because you're often the only person in the room. I've been in that position most of my career, and you have to realize it and acknowledge it and figure out the best way to deal with it. And for me, it's been, how can I develop other people? So I don't end up most of the time being the only person in the room, but it is the reality of where we are today. So great question.
Yeah, it is. If I can just add two very quick points, and one just more on the personal side. So I grew up in Brazil until I was in middle school, and my parents have very thick accents, and my dad's a professor, has been a very successful professor, and my mom, who's now almost in her almost 70, and she finally got to the point where she's like, I don't care if people don't understand me, I'm just gonna say whatever I want to say, and it's their problem if they don't understand me. So I wish it didn't take so long to get to that point, to just be like, I have something to say, and I'm saying it clearly, and if you don't get it, that's on you, right? Like, you're not trying. So so don't worry about that. But what I would say is, when you go into a job interview, ask about diversity and inclusion efforts, and you can usually tell if they're being sincere. You can usually tell the types of things that organizations are really putting in place, and ask about mentorship, and ask all these questions, because they're really important questions, and those are things that you need to know going in, and whether that's an organization you want to go into, because you're interviewing for a job is as much you just, it's much them deciding if they want you, but also you deciding if that's the environment you want to be in. And so, definitely ask those questions.
Thank you, everybody. So I'm afraid we're out of time, but you have our speakers' LinkedIn. So if you want to contact them, I'm sure that would be fine, I hope. And also, of course, this afternoon we have the networking session, so we can continue the conversation then as well. So at this point, I just want to thank our speakers. Thank you very much. It's wonderful. And in about 10 minutes, we will continue with the second session. So you'll get a 10-minute break, and I'll see you a little bit later on in the program.